That's the hallmark of any good system, right? Where you make multiple changes at the same time, and
Yeah.
then you just assign value to whichever one you like afterwards, right?
There we go.
There we
There
No
go.
we go. All
idea
right,
what
let's
works.
start this thing again.
All right. Welcome to the Red Gauge Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Kyle. This is Josh, and today we are joined by our esteemed guest, Ron Mckeefery. How you doing today, Ron?
What's up, guys? Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's awesome.
Yeah, excited to have you on.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here. It means a lot to us. Yeah. All right. So, why don't we kick it off? You want to tell us a little bit about how you got into training?
Yeah, I pretty much grew up single parent, 5 kids. Long story short, stumbled across a football field, and a coach let me watch practice. I basically walked down the middle of the field during team period, and instead of kicking me off the field and cussing me out, he took me to the sideline, let me watch practice, and from that moment on, I wanted to be a football player, and I wanted to, and that led into coaching, and now a career that's spanned almost 30 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. Were the coaches early in your life a big influence, being one of 5 kids and a single parent and everything?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, my mom did everything she possibly could. She worked multiple jobs, and so, obviously, the male figures in my life were coaches, and just, sport, the coaches, the teammates, that all led to who I am today. And, really, again, I mean, like a single parent, 5 kids, inner city, Kansas City, all those types of things. Like, my path was not one that was going to travel the world and live on, be in private planes and, work with the best athletes. Like, that's not where I was headed. As far as these guys don't go, right. And the sport has allowed me to do that.
Yeah, I know sport definitely saved my life. When I was growing up, I assumed that I was just my career path was like prison. And then I had some really great coaches who kind of got me stood up and pointed in the right direction. And I don't think I'd be, now I got a great life, great family, great jobs, but I don't think I'd be here if it wasn't for them. So they make a big difference.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, not everybody has like the big watershed moment with a coach, but like it's pretty cool to think of how many kids you've probably
impacted
in one way or another.
Yeah.
It's a great part about coaching.
Yeah, I think that, I always tell that story, when I speak and things like that, because I think it's important for coaches to know that, like, that coach, he's never thought about that split second decision that he made, never one more time.
Right.
But that split second literally changed my life. And that's the power of coaches. That's the power of that you have, entrusted upon you. And so we all need to recognize that and appreciate it. And not everybody gets that honor of being able to have that type of role in people's lives. And, I tried to find that coach and haven't been able to do it, but, it's, to me, that's powerful.
Yeah. Well, I know one of my coaches who was real influential, he came and asked me to help him start a gym after he retired from teaching. He was 72 or whatever and was like, I want to start a gym. You want to come run it with me? And I took a pretty significant pay cut because I was like, absolutely. Like, anything I can do for you, like, let's do it. We'll go right now, And,
right.
It's because it means a lot. It's a huge amount to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what do you got on your list there, Josh?
Well, one big thing, I just see your helmet wall in the background, and it's pretty epic. Like, so you got into the world of athletics, yeah. But do you want to kind of take us through the journey? Yours is obviously a pretty awesome one of like growth. Like some coaches like me, I've stayed at the high school. I've stayed at the same high school my whole career. How has your journey gone? When I was young, I thought about it, getting into the college world and talking to my wife how, that might mean a year here and step up in rank, but a smaller school here, and all of a sudden, and we just decided to stay in our local area. Do you want to take us through kind of the journey and where you are now? Obviously, we know where you are now, but some people listening may not.
Yeah, sure. I think I'll try to not bore everybody and give at least a list some tactical things along the way. I think,
Yeah, that'd be great.
for me, it's always easy to connect the dots when you look in the rearview mirror, right? But when you're going through it,
Right.
it's never that clear path, and so I played college football, a little small school, tried to get a GA, couldn't get a GA because back then it's just, you didn't have the right logo behind your name or didn't play at a high enough
Sure.
level. And so I was fortunate to get a unpaid internship with the Kansas City Royals. And I was the big league guy in the city. And, we had Johnny Damon and Carlos Beltran and some incredible players, on that team. But I did it because I wanted to be in pro football. And I felt like if I was in pro sports, that would be an easy connection, right? And,
Yeah.
and it worked, and so I got offered a AAA job, so one step from being a Major League Baseball head strength coach and a $50,000-$60,000 job 30 years ago, to take an unpaid internship with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because in my mind, I wanted to be football, and so like that didn't make sense to my family. That didn't make sense to other people, but to me that made complete sense,
Right.
and I think the lesson throughout my career has been you have to take strategic risk. If you want to, be elite or work in elite places and those types of things, like you have to take some strategic risks. So leaving a full-time job with the Kansas City Royals or go take an unpaid job with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that was a strategic risk. Now I have that logo, that helmet on in my resume for the rest of my career, right? That led to a part-time role, an assistant role, and then I left that to take head strength coach position with the NFL Europe, and so two things I saw with that opportunity were the fact that I would have a head strength coach at 22 years old on my resume,
Yeah.
and the NFL, right?
Yeah.
And it'd also be a cool life experience / talking point in my
Right.
career. It's something that's come up throughout my entire career of like, oh, that's a cool experience. Like, tell me about it. And it leads to conversation, right? From there, I took a head strength coach position with the University of South Florida. That was a startup program. They just started football a year before that, but it was a Florida program. It's a sleeping giant. It's Tampa, Florida. All those things. And what do you associate with Florida, right? Speed. And so that kind of got on my resume and building a program. And so I was there for 10 years, and we went from one AA non-scholarship to 6 straight bowl games and a number 2 ranking at one point.
Yeah.
From there, a new coach came in. I wasn't his guy. He wasn't my guy. So I took a special forces job and, and so ended up working with special forces. And again, what do you associate with special forces? Some people, they look at that as getting out or getting out of the profession or getting out of sport. I looked at it as, you associate leadership, you associate toughness with special forces. And, that was going to be a nice talking point again on my resume and a good experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not too many jobs you have to take the oath to be a strength coach,
Right.
From there, University of Tennessee was a no-brainer, right? SEC football. We let go there. I go to Cincinnati Bengals. It's the first time I've been an assistant since I started, in my career.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like you, my head football coach in college got the head job at Eastern Michigan. And, they hadn't had a winning season in over 30 years. And, I'm sitting there and I told my wife that if he ever got a Division I job, I'd leave where I was at to go work for him. It's the kind of leader he was, kind of guy that, that impact he had in my life. And so he got that job and he made the call, and I was like, oh man, freaking Eastern Michigan, it's minus whatever right now. And, 30 years of losing and all those things. But, there's people that run from that and there's people that run to it. And him and I both are kind of those kind of guys where, you run to a challenge, and now they've been to 6 straight bowl games, and, they've really turned that program around. Met Kalen DeBoer there. We adopted our 3 kids from Ukraine back in the day, and we were living apart. We kept them in Tennessee. When I went to Cincinnati and Eastern, and we kept trying to kind of get them up there, but it just schooling wise, it wasn't working out. And so I ended up saying that, I'm not going to miss the last 4 years that they're in the house, and so I took a vice president job with Play. And originally it was just to be a brand ambassador, but it led to Team USA football. It led to 28 teams in China that I worked with, rugby teams in Australia and the UK, football teams in Mexico and Ireland. And this world experience that really kind of opened up my eyes to the use of technology and sports science around the world.
Yeah.
It also gave me some business skills that, I think there's a lot of coaches that are sitting there going like, what's my exit plan? What's my backup plan if this thing doesn't work out? If I'm not able to get a job, and unless you've done that and that you have these skills that translate to business,
Right.
or the real world, like you're not very confident, but going in and having, being able to negotiate a $2 million deal in Beijing, China through a translator with the family that brought the Olympics to Beijing, like that gives you confidence.
Yeah.
And from there, Kaylin got the Fresno State job. Our kids graduated. It was a perfect time to kind of go back to college football. So I went to Fresno. We won there. Go to Washington. We're in the national championship. And we've led to now Alabama here. And the strength coach and sports medicine, everybody was in place here. The athletic director didn't want to make a move there. So I came in as the special assistant to the head coach, and basically kind of guy that puts out fires all day long, and deals with all the fun stuff that goes along with college football right now.
Yeah. So, one thing that I'm interested in just on like kind of the back end side would be going through so many different changes, both the pros, college, kind of outside, like how much of your, we'll just say programming, like how much of your message stays the same and how much, do you have to change? Like, were there any situations where you walked in, like I said before the show started, when I walked into the University of Washington's weight room and I saw all of the velocity trackers and how you were programming with velocity, like I've seen those kind of things, but it's not something that I can do personally in our weight room. So have you like stepped into situations where you were almost like, oh man, like I got to step my game up or learn a whole different avenue of training, or maybe the opposite. Maybe you went from, you were saying like you were in the NFL and then going backwards where you were used to a certain level. Like how do you pull that back?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think, I tell my staff all the time, like, if I literally remember them putting a computer lab into my college for the first time,
Right.
And so like, if I know computers better than you do, then we got a problem, and so, but that said, I mean, I've recognized early in my career that I had to stay ahead of the curve when it came to technology. So I always kind of challenged myself to stay ahead of that. And I think the fundamentals, to answer your question, I think the fundamentals are the same, right? And you have to have, like I wrote a book called The CEO Strength Coach, and in that, one of those things is that you have to be a great technician, right? Like you have to be a great technician without the tools, without the toys and the tech, and those fundamentals. Side note, when I went to China one time, and I was onboarding some coaches I was going to leave there, and we were setting up the weight room to train the team the next day. And as I'm walking out at about 10 o'clock at night, we're training the team, mind you, at like 7 a.m. the next morning. I just turned to the translator and I'm saying, hey, look, at some point I'd like us to get some bumper plates in here because all they had was iron and we wanted to do some weightlifting, right? I show up at 6 o'clock in the morning and they had worked through the night and gotten all the equipment out of the weight room and took it to wherever. I don't even know where they sent it, but we showed up and they thought that I had said I didn't want that equipment and that I wanted all new equipment.
Oh,
and so for 2 weeks, we had to train the team with time under tension principles and body weight and manual resistance. And so again, like if you don't have a solid foundation, a principle-based foundation, then all that stuff doesn't matter, you
Right.
know, and you're able to train an Olympic caliber team with just body weight and time of attention, you know. And so I think what I've tried to do in these different places is adapt to the environment and then strive to make it better, you know. And so do you need tech to be able to run a good program? No. Can you also, you know, use tech to enhance your program? Absolutely. And so I've always tried to show what's possible, but work within the system.
Right.
Have you ever had athletes who were like real outliers? Like when you go to do some velocity-based training, or we saw some videos where they were wearing like the chest bands, you know, to get an idea of how much work they're putting in the day and stuff. Like, do you ever have kids where you're like, you know, you had a plan and then you start looking at their data for the workout and you're like, oh, you've already spent all the energy you can for today, or or you know, you're not even started yet. Let's keep going. Like, does that happen very often?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, you know, I think the biggest thing with technology is, you know, most of it, 90% of it is algorithm based. So if something's messed up in the algorithm, you know, then it throws off the data completely, right? You know, and so you can't take any one piece of data in a vacuum and make decisions. I try to look at it, you know, holistically and say, okay, here's what the data is telling us. Let's track this over time. Let's make decisions based off that. And so some guys just run hot. That's just who they are, you know, and you have to make the adjustment, but the work's the work, you know, and so it's not like you can just go not practice or those types of things. Now, what it does do, in my opinion, is you don't really ever, to me, like I don't make too many program wide decisions or athlete wide decisions based off of it, but I do challenge what I'm thinking that I'm doing, you know, and seeing the data and being like, okay, well, maybe I programmed maybe a little too much on that one, you know, or I didn't program, or I didn't program enough. And, you know, I think when you start really getting into GPS and you start kind of looking at your plan throughout the entire year and you're like, oh man, maybe I didn't need to run them freaking 18 half gassers in freaking February, you know, when you're looking at the data, right? So I think it just challenges you as a coach to really look at your program objectively. But to go in there and be like, oh, your central nervous system's fried, we're not going to do anything today, like that never happens.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know like the velocity-based training has like a lot of positives to it, right? Like it's feedback for the athletes. Feedback is always good. The more feedback you get, the better engagement you get. And it also kind of washes out a little bit of the I feel good or I don't feel good on a short-term level. Like long-term, if your athlete comes in every day saying they feel like crap for 3 months, that's probably something that needs to be addressed, right? But if they're just having a rough day, they might still be able to perform fine, even though they don't feel like it. So it does provide a lot of feedback for athletes, even in the short term, you know?
Yeah, I think, you know, ultimately it's, you know, I mean, there's going to be days where they're going to have to perform and they're not optimal. You know, I mean, there's going to be game days when that happens. So I think it's more of a teaching tool than anything. In that, like, hey, look, this is like what happened. You know, that basically creates a conversation. Okay, your central nervous system's fried, HRV's high, you know, whatever. Like, let's have a conversation with why that's the case. Oh, you broke up with your girlfriend. Okay, I understand that.
Yeah.
Still got to perform, you know, whatever it might be. But I think, you know, you create conversation, you look at you know, holistic trends, and then you just try to do your best to kind of put the best program out there. And I think that just gives you information that makes you a better coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our question is like, especially at like the director level, but at the Division I level, most of the people you're getting in, you know, are the freakiest athletes that are at my level, being high school, right? Are you still interested in trying to make them like as big and fast and strong? Or like how much is just, all right, they are the athletes, like they are strong enough. Now let's make sure that they're able to make it to the season, like injury prevention. At that level, do you get to like almost, I don't want to say back off. Back off isn't what I'm trying to say, but you know what I mean? Like, whereas my kids were coming from the bottom, so I've got to ramp it up, try to get as much as humanly possible out of these kids so that they can go play college football. How much does, allowing the rehab and prehabs and dialing it back. Does that happen at the Division I level, or is that just something that high school coaches think happens?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's a continuum, right? So it's not just performance, but it's also injury prevention and keeping your talent on the field, right? And so like I always tell the story of Warren Sapp, who worked with the Bucks. The guy, he couldn't even point you to the right direction of the weight room at Miami. Like he didn't know, like he couldn't tell you where it was at. But the guy was freaky strong, right? He's an unbelievable, Hall of Famer. And he would always come in and he'd be like, repping 315 like it's nothing and having a conversation like, why am I doing this crap, and throw the weight, and it wasn't until we sat down at one point and been like, hey, look, man, you make literally $16 million a year. You play 16 games. That's $1 million every game you're playing. Right. So like, if I can just get you to play one more game, that's another $1 million to your family. Is that important to you?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we kind of had a conversation like that we at least had some common ground, and it wasn't a fight every single time.
Yeah.
But so I think, yes, to your point, like the injury prevention and you got to be smart and you got to keep your talent on the field and those types of things. I think the other part of that equation is like, I think there's tons of great coaches at the high school level, but there's also tons of coaches that are kind of held hostage a little bit by some of these kids.
Sure.
To where, they don't train, they don't develop because, some coach somewhere says, hey, look, this guy doesn't, he's good, and so they actually, a lot of times those stars come in underdeveloped, because they were the one that was scoring 5 touchdowns without,
right.
Practicing.
Yeah.
And
coming out of a state that they have like open transfers, and if you're going to make it fun of our boy, we'll just go over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I think the assessment, I think you got the bell-shaped curve, right? You got the ones that are just freaky everything, and what you're trying to do there is you're keeping them on the field and you're working the power end of the curve, right? And that's where the philosophy-based training, things like that come in, and you're able to do a little bit higher level programming. Then you've got the bulk of your team that needs to continue to get stronger, but also, it's a balance between strength and power, right? And then you've got this other third that is like, we've got to develop, and all while what makes it tough is the team building aspect that oftentimes gets, underappreciated. I mean, you're literally the head coach for the team, 80, 75% of the year.
Right.
You're the only coach that's dealing with these players for 75% of the year. 4 months of the season, they've got their coaches, right? And with recruiting and all the things that are the way they are now, like it's even becoming harder and harder. And so like doing that in a way that brings everybody together, and so like I give you an example. So I like to be tactical. We don't train like our freshmen separate than our seniors, because that freshman may have to play with that senior,
Right.
And they have to be able to build that communication, that camaraderie, and that trust, in the off season. So, for example of a bench workout, let's say we're doing Windler 5-3-1 with that freshman, and so we're, 40, 50, 60% on our warm-up sets. We're 65, 75, 85% on our sets of 5, right? So we've got 6 sets of 5 in there. Well, they may be doing 6 sets of 5, so 30 total reps, whereas my senior that's at that same rack, that's the other corner, he may be doing, 10 sets of 3 with, at 1.2 meters per second.
Right.
And so they're doing the same number of reps. They're doing it in different ways, but they're building that camaraderie and trust at the rack, and you're being able to develop them at the stage that they need to be developed. And so that, to me, those are the kind of the hidden little nuggets that separate out a lot of the really good college strength coaches. Is not just developing in a vacuum, but developing the unity and the camaraderie and the team at the same time that you're being able to develop them and meet them where they're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I had never considered before the fact that, as a strength coach, you're the one with them for 75% of the year and just you. Like that puts a lot of responsibility on the strength coach, and on the selection process and stuff to find somebody who's really great at building a team and working with kids and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah. If you have to make the decision, like if you're, working with your team and you have to decide, like, I have a choice between doing something that will improve team engagement or doing something that has a bigger training effect. Like, do you tend to choose the one that has more engagement that builds the team as opposed to doing the bigger training effect? Like if you're in a position where you need to pick one or the other?
Yeah, it's probably one of the best questions I've been asked on the podcast. I choose team
Yeah.
10 out of 10 times,
Yeah.
and I think I think what has probably made me unique in this profession is that I've never looked at myself as a strength coach.
Yeah.
I've always looked at myself as a football coach that does strength. That's just where my expertise is. And so I think when you look at things through the lens of a football coach, not being able to deadlift, like, some strength coaches, you walk downstairs and you tell them, hey, you can't deadlift today. And you can literally see their brain short circuiting and smoke coming out of their ears, right? Like,
Right.
what do you mean I can't deadlift today? And that's just a multiple joint bilateral lower body movement. Like, we got freaking 100 things we can do for that,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying it's not the most efficient way. I'm not saying it's not the best way. I'm just saying that there's a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and I think that's where a lot of coaches, strength coaches, struggle is they don't look at it through the lens of a football team, football coach, and so you have this kind of antagonist type of relationship when it doesn't have to be that way. Like, you're all going in the same direction. Philosophy of a quarterback, play, or the philosophy of a defense is no different than a strength and conditioning philosophy. It's what you identify with, what you believe in, and and getting players to buy in, coaches to buy in. I always say that we, especially early in your coaching career, early in my coaching career, I probably did 10% of what I wanted to do and 90% of what the coaches I worked for did.
Yeah.
Now it's probably flipped, right? I probably do 90% of what I want to do and 10% is that sugar. I call it sugar, right? We got the meat and potatoes. This is what it's going to be in our program. And then I throw a little sugar in there, and yeah, the freaking wide receivers, they're juggling tennis balls between reps. I don't give a shit. Like,
Right.
do whatever, like, if that's going to help you think that this room translates to the football field, go hit a sled in between sets. I don't care.
Right.
But I think, again, when you fight that as a strength coach, like, that doesn't apply, or it's not sport specific, or it's, I know the weight room better than you do. Why, like, you're just fighting a losing battle, and you're probably not going to have a job very long.
That's what I was going to say. As a strength coach, especially if that person's the football coach, like, that's a dangerous. I mean, I guess you got to figure out if you want to attach yourself to that person if you are having those arguments, but
yeah, I mean, again, I think it's your job to educate, right?
Right.
As well. I mean, the football coach I worked for in South Florida was a maniac. I love him, but he's a maniac, and I had to find a way for him to, for us to communicate and get my point across. And so if I just came at him and said, like, no, the coach, like, running 9,000, half gassers is not the answer, in the moment, never going to happen. He was going to swing a bigger bat than I was, right?
Yeah.
But if I put a piece of paper in his mailbox at the time and had some research that backed it up, and maybe showed a couple other programs that were doing it a little bit differently, like, he always came around, and then I didn't have to fight that battle as much,
right.
moving forward, and so, I mean, we have the curse of knowledge, we have, this experience and whatnot, but, like, there's a lot of really good coaches out there too. And, there's a lot, because we're not doing a great job as a community helping produce the research to support our viewpoints, but there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily, researched and supported in the literature that works as a football coach.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just goes to show how important that you mentioned early, right? How important the relationships are with not just with the athletes, but also with the rest of your staff, right? Because if you can't build and maintain those relationships, nobody's just going to give it to you just because you got the job title, right? You gotta show them that there's value in what you want to do. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, real important. Okay.
Uh,
Oh, go ahead.
Before we get, I do want to talk. One of my biggest takeaways from listening to you speak was kind of that the team building, the why, and the your 3 questions. Like we definitely want to get into that. But if we are going to transition a little bit from the athlete, I do want to ask a question. Every podcast we have Monroe's random question, and my question to you, if you could think about it, is who is the just freakiest athlete that you've ever had? I would say train. You've probably trained plenty of awesome people, but or just been around. Maybe it was a person on a different team where you were just like, holy crap, just blew your mind. Freaky athlete.
Present company excluded. You don't have to think about us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, man, I mean, Coach Max Crosby came in as a 200-pound spring bean when he got to campus, but his motor was on another level. We had obviously some creatures at Washington last year. I think Jason Pierre-Paul is probably the one that is the freakiest athlete that I've coached. I saw him and I begged him. Like I begged him. I told him I would pay him money. I begged him to, and instead of run the 40, he did at our bowl game. He's 6'5", 265 pounds, and he did back handsprings all the way across. He did it all the way across the field and back to the opposite hash without stopping. And I begged him instead of running the 40 to just do back handsprings down the 40, and it would have been like still talked about to this day, but he didn't do it, and he was a freak. I mean, being in the NFL, like Calvin Johnson, stretching a guy, before our game against them, and he comes running by, and you're just like, holy crap, like that's the dude. But there's Geno Atkins, freaking Warren Sapp, John Lynch, Derek Brooks. I mean, I can go on and on.
Yeah. So track was my sport. I wasn't ever a football player. They wouldn't let me play because I was all messed up. I couldn't pass a physical, but my track coach didn't care. He was like, yeah, you can throw shot put. Let's go do it. But I remember at one meet, and I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name right now. I'm sure I'll remember in 20 minutes and blurt it out. But we were at a meet, and they announced it was time to warm up for shot put. He was sitting in the bleachers, like the front row of the bleachers. From sitting in the bleachers, he jumped over the guardrail and down into the stadium, and it was like a 15-foot fall, and just popped up and walked over to throw shot put. And he was like, again, 6'8", 350 pounds maybe, like just a massive dude. I remember seeing that and being like, oh yeah, there's levels to this game for sure.
Yeah, everybody there at the trial is obviously awesome, but just different. Yeah, mine probably, I guess, the most impressive person I've been around would be Ed Cohen, powerlifter.
Yeah.
Real popular in the 90s, like 2450 total or something like that. But I obviously didn't train him. I actually just walked by, went to say something to him, and then just was like, I can't say anything to this man, and walked away. I'm not strong enough for that guy. But yeah, unless I would love to jump in and talk about kind of the 3 questions, because that was
sure. Yeah, let's do it.
I think it was 2 years ago that I came and saw you, and that really kind of changed the way that I thought about the weight room as like a holistic, like year-round thing instead of just being a thing that the kids did. Like it really changed the way that I thought about the weight room. So just talk a little bit about the why and introduce the 3 questions that you have with the kids. I think it would be a great thing for everybody to hear if they haven't.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're referring to is just, we have I call it a why meeting now. It wasn't until I read the Simon Sinek Start With Why book, several years later. But basically, in that he has the golden circle, right? You got to know the how and the what before you got to know the why before you can determine the how and the what. And I thought that was great, but like it's hard to get to somebody's why. If I ask you why do you coach, you'll give me some kind of surface level answer of you're good at it, or you want to make a difference or whatever, right? But that's not really your why. Like trying to get to these kids, like why do you play football? 90% of them would tell you just, I'm good at it. That's why I play football,
Right.
And so like I asked 3 questions to kind of really dig into the core of people, and the first question is always, if you weren't a football player, golfer, tennis, whatever, like what would you do? And so if this was taken away from you, and, most of the time they've never thought about their mortality in the sport. Football is just going to be what they do forever, right? And they haven't really thought about and so then you start to kind of get like, oh, I'm going to go start a gym in my hometown, or I'm going to go be a police officer, or I'm going to go do this. And you're like, then you start to ask, like, why would you do that? And you get some good answers, and it helps you kind of, be able to draw upon that. If they're like, oh, I'm going to go run a company. Okay, well, when they're sitting there and they're acting like a jackass on the squat, and they're dancing at the water cooler or whatever, you can be like, hey, look, like, is the president of freaking Sprint, are they going to do, or would they be doing what you're doing right now? And it's another way to come at it without having to get in their face and scream and yell and, and posture and all those types of things. And you're reminding them of what they want to do, right?
Yeah.
It connects with them on a different level. The second question I'll ask is always, what's the most difficult thing you've ever been through? And we're all kind of a little bit of a product of our environment, and knowing the toughest things, connects you pretty quickly. And we had a player at South Florida that, all we knew about the player was that he was in foster care, but he lived with his grandma his last year, and we signed him and he was in our program. And that's all we pretty much knew about. And it wasn't until I asked him that question did he tell me that, like, he watched his dad shoot his mom and then commit suicide right in front of him. And then he went into foster care, and his grandma got him out of foster care because all she saw was a paycheck of him going to college and potentially going to the NFL. And it wasn't like love necessarily, right?
Yeah.
And and so like you hear that, and this kid ends up going on and he's a surgeon right now, which is incredible. But like that kid, I'm not going to motivate that kid by fear. Like, I'm not going to, oh, you better do this or I'll, like, who,
Right.
he's like, yeah, whatever, dude. I've seen the worst, know. But like, that kid needs a freaking hug every time he walks in the weight room,
Yeah.
and when you know that and you can be that person for that guy, like it connects you on a different level. And then the third question I always ask is, who's the most influential person in your life? And they tell you grandma, pastor, coach, teacher, whatever, right? And then you get their number and you're like, hey, look, I'm gonna call them. And you just take a couple different days on your way home from work, and you just make a few phone calls. And as humans, we're really good about telling people how much they mean to us, right? And so like when I call these coaches, teachers, parents, whatever, they always think that you're calling for something bad, right?
Right.
There's a coach calling, and when you tell them something good, and like how this kid's a stud, and you saw him freaking carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs for somebody, he must have learned that from somebody. He might have learned it from you, right? Oh, by the way, did you know that he says you're the most influential person in his life? Like, it's a pretty powerful moment, right? There's, I mean, like 90% success rate of making those people cry, and so we hang up the phone. What do you think those people do?
Yeah. Immediately call.
Circle back.
They call
Yeah.
they call the kid, right? And so now you've got the most influential person in their life saying that this coach actually gives a shit about you, and is saying great things about you. And if you don't think that brings power into the weight room, and that you're able to ask that kid to do more, you're crazy. Especially in the transactional world that we live in now.
Yeah.
And so like knowing those things, being able to push those buttons, like, hey man, like you got bigger plans in life, you got bigger goals in life than this weight room. Like you're forming these habits right now, or like you've been through worse crap than this, or hey, do I need to call freaking grandma and tell them that you're acting like a jackass today? Like any one of those three become levers that you can kind of use without being like, you're a piece of crap, you're lazy, you're soft,
Right.
whatever else coach speak you want to give a kid, and,
Yeah.
being able to really probably take, and the other part of that is like, you might have like Jason, we had Jason for 18 months, like you don't have the time to build this really, really
Sure.
deep relationship over 4 years, 5 years now. You got to do it quick, and so those questions have been a way for me to connect with players and kids on a faster level.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, turnabout's fair play. Who's your most? Or wait, no, wait. What's the one? What if not football? What would you do?
Yeah. How many
Yeah,
times have you been? How many times have you answered this?
well, it's good that you asked that because that is something that I fail to mention sometimes is that you have to model when you ask those questions, you have to model it.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to give them example. So like to answer your question, I answer it every single time.
Yeah.
And so if I wasn't football, then I would probably be in the military or police or some sort of team, something with bigger purpose than myself, type of environment. Most difficult thing I've ever been through is my brother was murdered,
Oh.
and I had to be the one to tell my mom, and so that was not easy,
Yeah.
and then the most influential person is my wife, and my mom being a close second. So, I think those, and I think that's my goal in life has always been to be able to provide for my family in a different way than I was able to, my kids would be raised differently than I was being raised, even though I was raised by an incredible woman and did everything she possibly could. I didn't want our kids, my wife, to go through the struggles,
Right.
that we went through.
Yeah. I grew up pretty hard. My wife grew up like not just without a lot of creature comforts, And we've talked a lot about how like we've got our own boys now, and they've grown up in a very different environment than I did. And I'm like, I feel good about it, and then I'm also like, what if this actually isn't that good, and I just don't know what good is, Like I grew up too much in the hole,
Right.
Yeah, but better.
How old are your kids? How old are your kids?
Both of our boys are in the kind of the same age band between 9 and 13.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I got a 9, 11, 13.
Yeah.
You got a 9 and a 13 or 10 and a 13?
9 and 13, yeah.
Yeah.
So here, I'll give you a great piece of advice. Well, two things. One is make sure that they get to that 13-year-old age. Like our thing was always if they were in school and they were getting good grades and they were on sports, then we wouldn't make them have a job.
Yeah.
They had to.
Yep.
They just had to do that, and that was a mistake. We should have made them have at least a summer job.
Okay.
And have to respond. I have to report and work for a boss and have to interact with people, and then have at least one bill.
Okay.
Because if they don't, then they don't have any concept of money.
Yeah.
And it's like my kids, no concept of money, zero. And they're 24 and 22 now, and so I think that's a piece of advice. So the second thing I would tell you is there's a great book. It's Raising a Modern Day Knight, and it's a really basically the premise of the book is essentially to instead of like society marking when they become an adult, when they can drink for the first time or whatever, right? Like you mark it with ceremony that they've gone through these different stages, based off your family code, so first coming up with the family code, and then like back in the Middle Ages when you would go from, squire to page to whatever junior knight to knight, like there was this, like it was marked with ceremony, and it was like your community and the people that raised you were saying like you've gone to that next stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then you celebrated that with occasion. So it's a great family parenting book that I think because again, like if your home team's not right as a coach, like you have no shot at having a great team on the
Right.
field.
Yeah. When my boys get asked those 3 questions, I don't want to be one of the answers of
That's right.
the hardest
most difficult thing you've ever
that they
done.
went through.
I like that those questions
Yeah.
kind of are like Oreo. You start out kind of good, and then it gets really rough in the middle, and then it gets good again. Like it's a real roller coaster to go through those 3 questions with somebody.
Yeah, it is. It is. And again, like 15 minutes, somebody on a deeper level than a lot of times coaches that have been recruiting them for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. What the calling them also does is those kids, especially at that level, Division 1, have probably had many adults come in, ask them a lot of the same questions
Mm-hmm.
for their own gain. And kids probably start to get used to that. Like, we want you to come to our school, sure, because we want you, but because I want to be a successful coach. Where then you calling them shows them probably for the first time, like, oh, that wasn't just a random questionnaire. Like, that coach actually then did something with the knowledge. So
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah, we talked on the and maybe you could talk a little bit about recruiting, but we talked on the last episode a little bit about when I went on my recruiting trips. Like, there was a school that I was real excited about, and after I went on the trip, I wanted nothing to do with them because the coaches didn't talk to each other, the teammates didn't talk to each other, no one liked anybody, and I was like, I don't want to be in this environment for 4 or 5 years, where like there's just a weird low level of hostility that exists all the time, and ended up really falling in love with a school that it wasn't really on my radar. Like, I got 5 trips and I had 3 tops and then 2 that just offered a trip, and so but I ended up really falling in love with the program because of how well the team got together and how well the coaches managed the team and everything. So, like, when you're recruiting kids, how much do you think about, I mean, obviously recruiting is a super competitive thing, but like, how do you address all of those kinds of things that an athlete might care about?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because it's obviously become very transactional, especially with NIL and all these different things that are out there these days.
Yeah. That wasn't around.
The environment, and I think, it, again, another good book that I recommend is Blue Ocean, and the premise of that book essentially is like when people go out shark fishing, they go out, they circle up the boats, they throw chum in the water, and these sharks come and they fight over this little bit of chum that's in the water, and they pick them off, like shooting fish in a barrel, right? And the idea is like, why, as a shark, you're the biggest, baddest fish in the freaking ocean. Like, there's a whole big blue ocean out there. Why are you fighting over this little bit of whatever? Like, go be a shark, go eat whatever you want to eat, and I think I relate that back to like where we're at right now. Like, if everybody this is what we do in NIL, this is what, everybody's like, oh, we'll help you be a pro, we'll help you, you want to be in the NFL, you want to, no, like, this is what I think you double down on, the team unity and the bonding and the stuff, the stuff that seems corny. Like, you want to see freaking NFL guys compete at the highest level, go to like a freaking dartboard,
Yeah,
and have them throw darts, like, play pool or go bowling, and just the stuff that, like they can't buy that stuff,
Mhm.
you can't replicate that stuff, and so I think, to answer your question, like, I think that's what we try to do. Like, we introduce competition into everything we do. We had, we have Valentine's Day Massacre where we freaking put streamers and like the whole weight room pink and purple, white streamers and balloons and everything. And, I wear a freaking Care Bear, freaking love you helmet, and freaking go give hugs to everybody as a, like, and we play love songs, but then we mess them up in the weight room, right? Like,
Yeah.
stuff like that, like, that's the memorable stuff that the guys remember 10 years from then. And, and again, did we get the best workout that day? Maybe not, but like, what it did for the unity of the team, what it did for breaking up the monotony, what it does for like separating you from other programs. That's the kind of stuff that, makes it like nobody wants to go work for a robot. Nobody wants to go in and it's freaking name, rank, and serial number every single day.
Yeah.
You know, mix it up, challenge them, create, you know, have creativity and ingenuity.
Yeah.
And if you take a step back in your periodization scheme, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is hard. It's hard to be an athlete. Like, you know, when you, whatever sport it is that you choose, right? 98% of the time you're training, you're not competing, you're not actually doing your sport a lot, right? You spend so much time, you know, just on the field practicing or in the weight room practicing or whatever. That's not the thing that you love, right? And so it's really important to have something that you're excited to be there and excited to be a part of the process. Yeah, huge.
Yeah, that's the best compliment I ever got from an athlete was he came in and he said, Coach Mack, I'm going to take your internet away because you're coming up with too many different exercises and stuff, you know, and like to me that's, you know, like rather than come in and be like, oh damn, we got to do this again, and they're like guessing,
Uh-huh.
that's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is one of my favorite things. It's always kind of like a landmine anytime I've been interviewing coaches is not like for a podcast, but for a job, is they'll say that they like to create tough kids. And if you ask them, how is it that you build tough kids? About 9 out of 10 have no response. So to prep the coaches who don't know how to build toughness, how do we build tough kids? What does it mean to be a tough kid? How do we do it?
Yeah, I mean, toughness to me is your breaking point, right? And so that's, you know, you got your physical toughness is just knowing what you physically can and can't do, and the only way to know that is to challenge that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to, you know, to push it. You got to do it safely. You got to do it systematically and progressively, but like, you know, but you do have to kind of let kids know that they can do more than they think that they can do. But with that comes the mental part of that. Like I've seen grown men lose their shit on an airplane because somebody's like taking 2 extra minutes to get off of an airplane,
Right.
you know, or get their stuff out of the overhead. And it's like, man, like this is what's going to break you is freaking sitting here for 2 more minutes. Like you are mentally weak, you know? And I think, you know, finding ways, and that's, you know, this is like more so than anything I do from a programming standpoint, probably my staff would tell you that that's like, I constantly will be like, nope, we were offsides, move back 5 more yards. Nope, we're doing that one again because I don't like the way that you finished. Or
Yeah.
nope, you know, like you're constantly finding ways to really like just challenge that and see who breaks and then coach them through that, you know, and you know, we find, you know, like again, trying to be tactical, like the winter 8 weeks, you know, whatever the number of weeks that you get is, that is always coach led. I don't care if we have everybody returning. That is coach led. I'm going to tell you exactly what to do, when to do it, where to go, the whole deal. The summer is when I, through the winter, have developed the leadership group, whoever that ends up becoming, into being the one that communicates everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't tell you anything. I tell them, and then they tell you, you know, and I'm having them do the exact same thing. You know, oh, we jumped offside. Oh, we didn't touch the line. Oh, you know, and they're the ones that now they're creating this kind of internal conflict amongst the team that they have to work through. And it's not the first time we did it when it's 4th and goal on the freaking 1 yard line in the second game of the year.
Right.
You know, and so, so yeah, I mean, to answer your questions, I think it's testing the boundaries of where you are mentally, physically, emotionally, in your toughness, and increasing that ever so slightly,
Yeah.
progressively and systematically.
Yeah, I think that coaching element is something I've seen a lot of people who are good at pissing off kids, but like the piece where you come back and you coach them into, you know, like this is how we handle it, this is what we're supposed to be doing, you know, the mastery isn't always there, you know. So like that's a real important thing, right?
And I think on a football staff, a lot of times, if it's a good staff, I feel like you know, if let's say the head coach is on one, you allow them, and then it's your job then to go pick kids up, you know. And sometimes as a strength coach, I'm the one that's, for whatever reason, I got to chew on the kids, and I hope that some of my leaders in the weight room are picking them up, you know. Sometimes they don't, and I'll circle around and try to make sure that anybody that I do see that I probably pushed over the edge, like let them sit in it for a second, and then I'll go, you know, try to solve it. But it really is it's a team aspect.
Yeah.
You know, even the weight room.
Yeah. 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 I'm really digesting that right now.
Yeah. Kyle, thanks a lot.
I'm a thinker.
So a little bit, just I think I should have wrote a note, but I think in 2021 was the end of your podcast. You got any advice or anything? You know, I think it was 328 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how much did you like it? Did you feel like you went for that long? That's a very long time. 328 episodes is a real healthy podcast. Like, do you?
Yeah, I went 7 years, and it was. I'm not even sure how many episodes I did. I think what I tell people is that as a profession, we're still in the first 100 years of this profession.
Uh-huh.
And so like if you think about medicine or accounting or business or whatever, right? Like we're talking hundreds of years, thousands of years of some of these businesses, right?
Right.
So like we all have an obligation to document this time better. Like, we wish that there was more stuff from the early years of accounting and whatever to kind of like, how did it become what it became, right? And so podcasting, YouTubing, all that kind of stuff, I think, we have an obligation to kind of do that. So I think you guys doing it, I think is awesome. I think, I know when I started mine, I think I was the second person to ever do a strength conditioning podcast. And there was no shortage of people like that's stupid, or why are you doing that, or or whatever. And then the same people 5 years later, like, well, wait, like you're making money doing that, or like that's allowed you to do X, Y, or Z. Like that's pretty cool. I go back to that blue ocean kind of mindset, like do what other people aren't, so that you can do what other people can't, right? And so like this kind of stuff I think is awesome. And so I would challenge you from from content. I think the people that I was maybe not as excited to talk to, I just did it just because it was like maybe other people were having them on their podcast or whatever. Like those were the people that maybe I wasn't as excited to do it, but I ended up learning the most.
Yeah.
Right.
And some of them became even great friends because of this kind of, medium,
Mm-hmm.
and so I would challenge you to get outside of your comfort zone and talk to people that you probably wouldn't normally talk to. And that will force you to grow and keep your content kind of fresh and whatnot. I think from a business side of things, because I think it's important for you to look at your podcast as a business, even though your motivations are probably just to give back to the community when you started it. I think to make a good podcast, you have to have a business kind of mindset to it. The one thing that I would say is like every piece of content that you produce, you want to find a way to make it evergreen so that people are constantly coming back to it and it doesn't just die the next week you go to a different podcast episode.
Mm-hmm.
How can you bring back people to those episodes in different ways? And how can you repurpose that content in a variety of ways? So give you an example, like I asked, in 360 something episodes or whatever it was, I asked the question like, what's the biggest mistake you ever made and how you learned from it? Right? I asked it in every single episode. That one question could have become a really cool book if I would have just transcribed that and gave it to an editor and said, make this
Right.
clean this up a little bit.
Yeah.
And that would have been a really cool book that I think myself and a lot of people would have enjoyed, and so how can you maybe set this thing up in a way that you're able to repurpose this content in a variety of ways and maybe create an asset like a book or something that might be something that can add to your bottom line too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're even out of this podcast already, you mentioned, the focus on relationships and just the tools that you talked about, like having a hard touch or a soft touch, circling back to their most influential person. Like that's one of the things I think everybody with a pulse is probably going to understand that, coaching is really about relationships. but what the actual tools are that you use to do it, like that's going to vary a lot from person to person, and there's probably high efficacy ones and low efficacy ones, and so like I'm already cataloging all those. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting this is episode 7, but it's technically our 8th one. We're bad at adding, so just the conversations that I've been able to have, and me and Kyle have talked about, like, making sure that we're not just setting up an echo chamber of the ideas that we like really trying to get stuff that we don't know about, or maybe even bring in people that aren't on the same ideals.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little easy, or me and Kyle have known each other for a long time, so we've bounced ideas off each other. So even though we don't see everything exactly, like, I'm sure
you're wrong about some things.
Yeah, we're yeah, we're pretty close. So having people on and not being able to not necessarily confrontational, but to have those conversations, because just because it's our opinion doesn't mean it's right. Like,
Yeah.
I'd like to see, or just expose people to both sides. One thing I have noticed is some of the confrontations I thought we were going to have, just because, like, the status of social media and Instagram and YouTube and the ideas that are floated out there, none of the strength coaches we've brought in have had those ideas. So by making this, I feel like we're creating a space where kids, coaches, parents can actually get real information from high quality coaching, instead of people that are just trying to be different
or
to make money,
or whatever.
because that's what I try to tell my kids. Like, most everybody on Instagram or wherever, YouTube, they're saying similar things, but they've got to be different, or else you won't click on them. Like, they've got to do something different. So at the base of what they're saying is probably true, but you got to be careful about some of the advice that they're giving. They've got to get you to click on their stuff.
Yeah. Or even just like in our conversation, I asked you if you choose engagement versus effect, and you said hands down engagement, build the team, right? I would have chosen the other every time. And so, like, it's nice to know that I'm wrong, and it's nice to know why. Like, I'm okay with being wrong. That's fine. It's part of growing up, right?
Well, and I think part of it also is, Ron is exceptional at that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you might, if you went that way, might be totally disingenuous.
Yeah.
And the kids would be like, well, I don't know what, it's got to be able to hit home. Like, it's got to be something that you actually believe in.
Yeah.
I think the thing, just to go, but I think to both of you guys' points, right? Anything in a vacuum by itself, like, I don't see it that way, where we're on polar ends of some sort of spectrum, right?
Right.
It's some sort of mutual there. Like, I have to be technically really sound.
Yeah.
Our program has to be technically really sound.
Right.
The way that I do that is I make sure that I have really, really good assistant strength coaches, that's their specialty. Like, that they're, and so, like, they're looking at the numbers and the data and they're programming every single day. And then I come in and give my 2 cents on, where it goes, but I have to have a high level of knowledge about all the different philosophies and all the different methods, so that I can make those kind of higher level decisions, right? And that just takes, that's the benefit of having this kind of perspective, right? When you talk to all these different experts every week, when you put these episodes out there, not only do you get the knowledge that you're getting on the episode, but you're getting the knowledge before and after, right? And you're getting the connection to be able to go and ask questions after the fact. It's making you grow. And I think that's the number one thing that I took away from those podcasts, is that, like, the podcast was great, and I probably should have used that in a lot of different ways to even beyond what I did to monetize it or do different things. But the relationships and the networking that I created from it,
right,
has made me 100 times better coach. And I'm literally probably one degree of separation from probably any great athlete or any great coach in the world now, because of those 307 conversations.
Right.
And to be able to get those kind of answers that quick, it validates you as a coach, validates you as a professional and an expert, but it, and it opens doors that people that don't do this type of stuff don't get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the insights that we've gotten already just in 7 episodes have been pretty spectacular. It's been a really enjoyable experience so far. Yeah. Do you have a favorite guest or a favorite episode? Maybe not a favorite guest. I don't want to pigeonhole you there, but a favorite episode from your show that people should go watch.
That's a good question. Man, the one that comes to mind when you say that, which is probably not the answer, but the one that comes to mind is I think it was one of the last ones I did with Boyd Epley,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
It was the last one.
and Boyd was, godfather of strength and conditioning in a lot of ways, right? And there's this expert and the guy that's done it all and had every national championship award you can win and association and all that. And his perspective on the profession at the time was pretty low of something that he helped create, and again, I think it just challenges, I have a lot of conviction about, you just look at our profession and, again, we're in the first 100 years, so there's going to be growing pains. I get that,
Mhm.
but like, what have we done as a profession to really grow the profession in the last 50 years? The only thing that I can think of is really tactical strength and conditioning, right? We've created this kind of another lane, but we really haven't. I mean, this profession that was born in a time when people literally thought that it was bad to lift weights, and we had these kind of pioneers that pioneered this profession into now where coaches are making close to $1 million, if not more than $1 million, doing it. Like that took ingenuity and creativity and guts and
Mhm.
resourcefulness and thinking outside the box. And the best that we've done now is tactical strength and conditioning, and we need to do a better job of finding ways to continue to grow this profession in a variety of ways. And having conversations like this are definitely one way to do that. But, I mean, the people that are doing this, the people that are listening to this, you have the reason why I titled my book CEO Strength Coach. It's because you have skills that literally would translate to being a CEO of a company if you were in the business world, and we need to find ways to utilize those skills as we grow, as we get age, as we, continue to get people into this profession. And because those, again, going back to our very first thing that we talked about, like the impact that we can have on people is incredible.
Mhm.
And that needs to translate to a lot of different things.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm amazed still at how much people, at our level, especially at the high school level, undersell the value of training. Like they'll tell kids like you don't need to lift weights, and it's like, man, if you're like a competitive athlete and you're hoping for scholarships and stuff, like the likelihood that you don't need to lift weights and you're still going to have access to that scholarship is pretty low and diminishing every year. And they think it makes you tight and slow, and it's like there's no like for the first day that you lift weights, yeah, but you acclimate to it.
Yeah, or if you just got on a bodybuilder's workout and did no prehab
Yeah.
stretching, like sure, you could become tight. But that's not, that's not training.
Yeah.
That's doing something different.
Yeah, we've always run into the thing where like our power lifters are always like winning, athlete of the year or whatever, and the coaches are like, it's not because they're lifting weights. It's like, man.
Yeah, I think this is like the challenge that I would give every young coach that came on my staff. And, I would always tell them that whenever you're talking to an athlete, you can't use the NFL as a carrot. You can't say because you're not doing this or because you are doing this, this is going to help you get to the NFL. Like you can't use that as a carrot. And I think it's the same thing probably at the high school level.
Right.
Like you can't do this to get a scholarship or
Right.
whatever. And I think, again, if you make it just about that, they're going to be like, yeah, BS. I saw this guy do it. He didn't lift weights and he went to the college or he went to the NFL or, he did it in spite of. So like, you have to find ways to make your room go beyond that, and that's why like the fun, creative workouts, the team building aspect, the testing the limits of your mental or physical toughness, all those types of things that draws people to you, draws you into this environment. And, that's why they want to be in the room, not because they just think that you're going to help them. Although we know that that's going to help them get to those things. But I think it's the default for too many coaches to say this is going to help you to, or it's a default to parents, and they're going to be like, okay, well, the personal trainer down the street played Division I and he looks better than you do. And so I'm going to take him to you and him instead of you. And he's going to train him. Right. And you can't make it about that. It's gotta be it's gotta be bigger. And
I like that. You build a program good enough and it doesn't matter what the counterculture is, right? People want to be
if you go ahead and finish your thought.
Oh, that was it. Yeah. People just want to be there if you do a good job.
Yeah. Like if you got a personal trainer down the street that some parent wants to send their kid to because he thinks it's going to help them, but like you got the rest of the team like bought into you and the culture, and freaking like you're having fun, like that kid's not going to want to go train there. He's going to want to be with his teammates and train with you because that's fun and they're excited and they're, so like, I'm not saying don't challenge yourself. Like again, that's a blue ocean mentality. Like I did that in the NFL where, all these guys would come and, and they would be like, well, my strength coach back in whatever city they lived in, says to do this, that, or the other. And I could have easily postured and pounded my chest and been like, hey, look, I'm your strength coach. You're employed by the Cincinnati Bengals or Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And like, you're going to do what I say and don't listen to that guy. Or I could pick up the phone and call that guy and be like, hey, look, what are you telling this guy? Like, why are you telling him that? What's the rationale behind it? Find common ground, or be proactive and go out there and train with them, and have a day and build, that common ground. So now I've got, instead of somebody that's constantly in their ear all year long, like challenging what I'm doing, I got somebody that's like, man, that guy's a great strength coach. Like, yeah, when you go there, like you should listen to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be this reductionist adversarial type of thinking. Now there's going to be those times when it is like that, and you can meet force with force if you have to, but I've never had to do that really. I just, find ways to draw people in. I think when you do that, I think that's how you're able to last for 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, we saw that with our when we were doing our summer program. We had like the Wednesdays where we just do kind of like an upper lower split, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday thing. And so Wednesdays we would play games, and they were all strength games and carries and throws and stuff. It was all training related. But pretty soon we'd have 60 kids showing up for Wednesday game day. And it was like, hey, there's more days of the week. Let's find ways to roll this out. But probably the lesson to take from that is to find more ways to make it fun and engaging on the regular, like to get them in every day. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't have to become a circus, right? It doesn't have to be this freaking, carnival every time they walk into the weight room. But like we would have, again, in the winter, we would have a draft and a winter competition, and every day your workouts were graded and it affected your score of your team. Every day we had competitions where you were competing against different teams and something, maybe a lot of times it's just whatever was in the workout, and we make the last set of pull-ups a failure set or something like that. We would also extend it past the four walls of the weight room and like, okay, who can get the most kids on their team to the volleyball game? Take a picture at the volleyball game, we're forcing them to hang out, and that's leading back to, the weight room, and then they rush them in to see what their score is for the, like the next day. And, stuff like that, in the winter, in the summer, we did it by position. So now it became like the offensive line versus the defensive line versus the quarterbacks. And, when all the coaches would go on vacation, none of them wanted their position group to be the last place team. So I kept them engaged to where, I didn't have to deal with a lot of issues. Right?
Yeah.
So like, you find ways. I would always tell our staff, like, we fix things with logistics. Like anything that's a problem in the weight room, don't come in and be like, there's a new rule. Like you want them to pick up their wrappers. Like, you either you get things that don't have wrappers, or you lock it up, you take it away for a day, and say it's a right, not a privilege, right? Or, it's a privilege, not a right. And, you take away from the freaking linemen, and all of a sudden they find a way to make sure the skinny guys put their shit in the trash can, so like you just fix things or you find ways to create the engagement a different way. And it doesn't always have to be this pound your fist. You better do this or else. Like, nobody, think about the people in your life when people do that with you. Like, do you want to work for that person?
Yeah.
Right.
Not
No.
even a little bit.
So yeah. So like, I think it's, always pause, take a second, look at it if you can come at it from a different angle, and accomplish the same thing.
Yeah. Are there any so strength culture in the United States, right, started out with just like sideshow stuff, right? It was just strongmen and freak shows and things, and then it kind of split, became strongman, weightlifting, powerlifting, bodybuilding, and then it kind of started grabbing traction with sport because the coaches like Boyd, who you mentioned earlier, our coach, the coach that we both started with, he started training in like the early 50s, and he had a wrestling team that went undefeated because they were the only team lifting weights. It's like, it was a good fun time for him. It was a story he'd tell a lot. But are there issues, like legacy issues, that you see that you wish would change in the way that like either athletes come to you or in program design? Is there anything that really stands out that's like a, man, I wish we could overhaul this at like a from the ground up kind of thing? Or do you have enough freedom now that you can do what you like to do and you don't have to worry about that so much?
Yeah, I think I think our long-term athletic development plan in the United States could use a complete overhaul, right? And, being able to control your own body weight, being able to have full range of motion, good movement, literacy, and quality, like those things, like I would rather them not bench 400 pounds when they get to me and be able to, do an overhead squat with a down rod, like we can figure out everything else. But, yeah, I think, I don't think that I think where most people, again, I think a lot of times I just look at it from a different lens, but like most people hate CrossFit, right? But like what I think CrossFit's done a good job of is, they've brought a bunch of different disciplines in, and, they're not afraid to be like, okay, we're going to throw weightlifting in. And so they bring in the weightlifting experts and they make sure that they learn how to teach it, right? And it's kind of like martial arts, right? You bring in a striking coach and you bring in a boxing coach or a wrestling coach, and then you bring in a jiu-jitsu coach, and you become this well-rounded fighter because of that. And it's also forced people to develop and create all these different tools and things that we can use for overload. I think I base everything off, principles. And I say I'm a principle-based strength coach, not a philosophy-based strength coach, because philosophies, are like religions, right? You become this either or when you never know what environment you're going to be thrown into.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, if anything, I would say that would be like, let's do a better job of really nailing down what some of those principles need to be, and give the pros and cons to all the different methods that are used to kind of develop those. And so, like, yeah, weightlifting, phenomenal. Powerlifting, phenomenal. But there's a cost, right? Mm-hmm. There's potential risk and there's potential costs on the body. Like, is that the cost that we want to give to be able to play football at a high level? For some positions, for sure. For others, maybe not so much. And so, like, I think it's just a matter of really digging into these different principles, these different methods, and trying to create some sort of long-term athletic development plan that is systematic and progressive, that more people can agree on, and I think we're closer to that than we were when I started. When I started, it was you were a machine coach or you were a weightlifting, barbell coach, or you were, strongman, basically. And like everybody hated everybody else.
Yeah.
So, but I think, I think people are coming in well rounded. I think there's just this higher premium put on these maybe 5-10 tests and maybe not the well-rounded athlete.
Yeah, and we have that conversation a lot. Like, having 40 times is great because, it's nice to know who's fast and who's slow. also, there's not very many times in your athletic career you're going to start in a 3-point stance, right? Where you're getting ready to run a 40. So like if you spend 6 weeks teaching kids how to have a great 40 start, like what is that carryover, right? Like how much of that is going to could you have spent that training time doing something that would have been more meaningful for their sport, right? So,
I mean, I get it. I mean, until we change how things are evaluated, like that's people are gonna want that to be that's gonna be a marker that you're evaluated on. So like training for it, I get.
yeah.
We got to do a better job of finding ways that is that the best way to evaluate. Rather than maybe put GPS pods in everybody's shoulder pads and get true game speed. That might be easier and it's getting cheaper and cheaper to do. So it might be something that is, mainstream here pretty soon. But yeah, I think the evaluation process has to change as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's something that we talk about a lot with kids is they have stuff they do or don't want to do, and it's like, and then you hear the conversation like, well, my recruiter asked about this, and it's like, okay, well, we can teach you how to do that. That's easy, but it's it's an extra step just because it's something that a recruiter's looking for, Yeah. If you, I mean, maybe this is outside the scope of the show, but if you could blue sky it and reevaluate, so you mentioned like track and field time, like what other tests, are there tests that you would love to be able to do with your recruiting class that you don't get to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you look at the reactive Y test, right? And in Australian rules football, in American football, the 40-yard dash has about a 30% correlation to success in the NFL.
Yeah.
Pretty low correlation. Whereas the reactive Y test in Australian rules football has a 90% correlation.
Yeah.
Because it's measuring reactivity, right, and acceleration. And so I think there's some different tests out there that exist that could be used better, but again, once you get to a point where you're evaluated on it, people are going to be trying to game it and be more, and make it more, efficient, whatnot. So, I think probably where the truth comes in, or I think the opportunity comes in, kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about where maybe I think we need to continue to evolve the profession. One of those places needs to be in the classroom. There needs to be a legitimate degree in strength and conditioning or a long-term athletic development, and when that becomes a degree seeking program, like people, our coaches. So you have to get a degree to be a coach in a lot of the European countries.
Yeah.
So they have some general understanding of physiology and things. So in those countries, sports science, there's a higher value and a higher premium put on those. And they do it at a better level than we do in a lot of ways. What the United States does on a better level is the art of coaching, right? And getting kids to run through walls and come back and pick up the pieces and doing all that and resources. And so we have to do a better job of blending that and and I think creating some of these degree programs that instead of our right guard, having a communications degree, knowing that full well that he's going to play and then he's going to coach.
Right.
Maybe he's taking a long-term athletic development degree or strength and conditioning degree or something that gives them more education. And it also puts a place where our aging strength coaches can go to teach and leverage that knowledge, but also then gives them the time to be able to do some of these research studies to prove some of the things that we're doing that works that we don't have necessarily the scientific literature to back up right now.
Yeah, the science literature is always interesting because so much of it is done like in a vacuum. Like it's really great if you're into powerlifting, weightlifting, bodybuilding because you're doing a barbell in a barbell and you're reading about barbells. But as soon as the barbell goes away and you're on the field, then the dynamics change a lot for how you manage fatigue and how you manage volume and all those other things. And there definitely is a big gap for sports science and in every sport,
All right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, you got any more questions?
I think I'm good. I have lots more questions, but I feel like this is a natural spot.
Cool. Yeah. So what can we, I know you got the 2 books. the CEO. What was the other book?
Weight Room Wisdom.
Weight Room Wisdom. Yeah, and then people can go find your podcast that still exists, even if we're not making new episodes. Was it Iron Chalk Talk?
Yeah, it lives on Iron Game Chalk Talk. There's episodes that are still on my YouTube page, so just search my name, YouTube. Then Isaiah Kasiyaha from Colorado School of Mines, he continued it on, and he's produced, I think, another maybe 200 episodes since.
Oh, cool.
So it's still going.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Would you
Appreciate it, guys. Like,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask if you wouldn't mind staying on for a few minutes after we stop recording.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that I think, what I tell people all the time is I know how much work goes into doing this, and so I appreciate it and respect it, and hopefully my audience does as well.
Yeah.
So do we.
So do we. So hopefully there's an audience.